Hello, wonderful people. Subject today is how do you turn shame and self-criticism into compassionate correction? Welcome. So if you get to that point where you're afraid to speak, there's a really good chance that you have been either criticizing yourself or criticizing another person. Hello, Susie. I'm glad to see that you're back online after your storm. And I want to talk to you today about a question that you can ask yourself and I'd love to hear your response to this because it's a course I was just doing about more compassion, and it's just got me thinking, what would be your greatest fear if you didn't have your inner critic? What happens when you don't have criticism? And if you find that where you're caught up right now with criticism is you're really focused on criticizing somebody else. So let's say it's somebody else's fault, whether it's the other people that should be doing something, whatever it is your focus, or if you're criticizing someone else or you're criticizing, what is your greatest fear about not having that criticism? So if I could wave a magic wand and all criticism was taken away from you, you couldn't criticize yourself, you couldn't criticize somebody else, what would be your greatest fear? What happens next? And take a moment to think about it. I'm going to share with you some things that came up for me on the training, is that actually if we didn't have criticism, I wouldn't have a gauge of my own core values, my own moral compass. I wouldn't have a sense of what was right or wrong for me. I wouldn't know how to self-correct maybe. If I didn't criticize other people, if I didn't have any criticism, maybe I wouldn't be able to tell them what it is that was not working for me. And so when you get that list, write down the list of all the things that you would lose if you'd lost the ability to criticize yourself and other people. And what I also have discovered, and I'm not too proud of this, but it's true, is that when I criticize somebody else, what I've discovered is it gives me a distraction from the emotion I'm feeling. And so if I criticize somebody else, it makes me feel better temporarily. So I would lose that. So think about yourself. So if you've got that list of all the things that you gain from criticism, how could you create strategies or resources so that those are the good things that come from criticism? So being able to speak up and tell somebody that what they're doing isn't working for me, that's a good thing. Wanting to feel better, that's an okay thing to want to have. So once you've got the list of things that criticism gives you, then you can start to cultivate a list of the solutions, the strategies, the things that you want, so that you can start to develop feeling better, speaking up and telling people when things aren't working for you. But you do it without the criticism, without self-deprivation, without putting yourself down, without putting other people down. Simply be able to find that voice so you can actually speak up and say, that doesn't work for me. And if you're struggling with this, one of the things that the Manager Critic book's all about is it's a tool to help you become your very own strength and solution detective, so that you learn to ask yourself questions from a place of compassion, from a place of curiosity, rather than from contempt and putting yourself down. So if you haven't got the tools out there, do check managercritic.com, or you can get it on Amazon, where you can turn any overwhelm into clarity through a self-coaching tool. But if that's not for you, think about it now. Research and find out who's the best cheerleaders, who's the motivators, who's the inspirer. If you could have the right person next to you right now, what would they be saying? What would they be doing? So if you could create and cultivate the perfect mentor, the perfect coach for yourself, what would the qualities of those person be? And think about how you could start to develop clarity and understanding of who that person is, in order that you can actually start to develop that as an inner resource, and you can become that coach, that mentor, that motivator for yourself. So those of you that have seen the logo, I don't know whether Susie will be able to put them up while we're talking, but we've got some images. Some of the free resources I've got is the Strength and Solution Detective is one. So that's my inner coach, my coach that says, what would you like to have happen, and what is working is this. And so my coach, and my detective's got the magnifying glass out, and my inner voice says, yeah, but you're really good at this, and what works about that is this. So although it didn't work in this situation, when it does work, it's this bit. I've also got my time monster there, that's a resource for checking if I'm complaining about time and maybe I'm getting stressed or frustrated or criticizing myself because of the time pressures I'm putting on myself. And so I can just check about the time language I'm using. And lastly, I have my cheerleader. And my cheerleader is that one that will really, really notice when I'm working hard and I'm digging deep and I'm getting through that messy, horrible bit of change, when it feels uncomfortable, and they will notice and they will encourage me. And so I've got inner cheerleader, an inner time monster, and an inner strength decision detective that is helping me on a daily basis to get up and get on and do things. So even when I feel the most afraid to speak, or I'm feeling like my critic's going overboard, those three resources click into place and help me to find my voice and to actually speak up and ask for what I want in order to work, plan and live at my best. So that's Monday's video. I'd love to hear what you find from those questions. So check in with yourself. If we were to take criticism out, I waved the magic wand and you couldn't criticize yourself or anybody else, what would be your greatest fear? What would happen next if you didn't have the ability to criticize? And that's all the things that work about criticism for you. And think about how could you build strategies and solutions into your life to have those things in there without the criticism. And to sort of complement and get the opposite of that, if you were to give yourself compassion, so it's self-correction rather than self-criticism, if you could create a metaphor or a symbol or a resource of a coach or mentor, what would the qualities of that person be? Mine's a cheerleader. She's there with her pom-poms. Yeah, yay, ray. And that suits me and my strength and decision. So I've actually got 3 mentors. I've got my strength and decision detective that reminds me of what I want, what works for me, and that, that even though those doesn't work all the time, it's there. My time monster is there to remind me that it doesn't work all the time, but most of the time it does, and to help me be aware of time perceptions versus reality. And then I have my cheerleader who's knows when I'm digging deep and I'm in that really uncomfortable place of change, so that she'll cheerlead me. Have a think about you. You might just need 1 mentor. Maybe like me, you need 3. And I also have my real ones, my cheerleaders like Susie are in my life too. But it's just thinking about your resources right now today, so that you can change it from self-criticism, shame and self-criticism, to compassion and self-correction. Hope that video is useful for you. If you are struggling with criticism, if you are spending the time criticizing yourself or you're criticizing somebody else, and what you'd really like to do is do more of what you love and ditch the critic that says you can't, then please get in touch and I'll help you to individually develop those strategies to have the things that criticism give you, but without the criticism. Have a fantastic Monday. Speak to you soon.